Poor communicating.
My bad, well.
I got it. So, just to finish going around the table, this side, why are you here, what do you do? Yeah, the guy who's dressed like the hacker, yeah.
I work for the International Circuit Report. Pass this around if you want. I work IT.
If it works?
No.
That's fine. The interlace isn't good. Fix it. Okay, next,
I do IT for court services.
court services.
I do IT for the Ninth Judicial Court System.
I teach computer science here at Ambrose.
Okay.
Well, IT contractor for a local IT company. I work for a consulting firm. We're the
Data analyst.
Okay. RSM guy, we know him, yes?
I work with the Bureau, FBI.
How you do?
Full of Rush Incorporated?
What's that?
Full of Rush Incorporated?
I'm the department head for the computer science department here at Cybersecurity.
Software developer for almost 20 years.
So, how much of your time for the last 18 years have you spent doing security by design before you started coding at a solution?
It's something that's a little complex, but not really. Not sure what the I would say
Okay, so did everyone hear that? Here's a guy who writes the code, and he is
I don't know if there's some kind of.
typical of 99.8% of all people who write programs. They have a problem that their client wants solved, and security is not in the forefront of what they do. I wrote code exclusively for 30 years, was a consultant, helped companies identify what was new tech for them, right? In the United States, high-speed trains, it's new tech. But if you go to France, it's something they've had operational for 43 years. In the US, new, France, old, right? So for wherever you meet your customers, they all are a different place in technology. So we focus on, just trying to get this thing to work, on the OT side. So Internet of Things, people know about that. Give me some examples from your home or life, but that's Internet of Things.
Webcam.
Say, louder?
Network cam.
Cameras.
Alexa.
Alexa, fix the damn presentation. Anything else?
Machine centers.
Machining centers. Yeah. And now that's not something you do at home, but I'm sorry, how many of you have a smartphone in your pocket or purse or on
I
you?
disconnected.
Wouldn't you call?
All right.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Wouldn't you call that an IoT device? Internet of Things?
Yeah, that's.
Why not?
Probably not.
Why not? It's not a desktop. It's not.
It's a full operating system.
Yeah. I mean, it's got everything. So, how many of you have a driver's license?
This works.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I earned my paycheck.
Well, okay. So, how many of you drive a car that's less than 10 years old? Okay. What makes that car work? How many, just as a guess, how many, in quotes, computers are inside your car? I'll give you choices. Less than 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, more than 30. So, less than 5. 5 to 10.
Wait, how are you counting if they're all connected? Is that one system?
Hey, all the phones in this room can talk to each other. Each phone's its own. How many are 10 to 20? Okay. How many are 20 to 30? How many are more than 30? Okay, ding, ding, ding. So imagine that you're running a business locally here and you've got 30 desktops. Okay? What do you have to do to protect that? Nothing or a bunch? What do you need to enable 30 desktops? Infrastructure requirement. What would you have to give them?
To enable 30 desktops?
If they want to communicate with each other, what do they need is infrastructure.
Switches, routers?
switches, routers, networks, a way to communicate, right? So we think a lot about stuff in very parochial terms. I've got a desktop, I've got a laptop, but we also have really smart phones, and for most of us, our phones have more memory, storage, and computing capacity than any desktop in our office. Why? Because you bought your phone, and your company bought your desktop. Right? But what about the printers? What are they? Are they IoT?
Depends.
What about if you work in one of those offices where you need a badge and you have to badge in?
Yeah.
What is that stuff? What about the sensors that figure out if you're there or not and turn the lights on and off? Well, the old versions weren't connected, but what about the ones that report into the building energy management system? IoT. What about the ones that take care of the water? What about the battery? I do not know how to use the engine. As I walk over and I'm looking for something to go like this, and I put my hand there, and I pull away, and the water comes out. But then I go to put my hand underneath it, and the soap dispenses. And I go to put the toilet seat down, because all the women in my life say, put the toilet seat down. And in someone's home, you put it down, and it goes. But you go to someone else's house, and you just tap it, and it goes bang! Right, that's not an IoT.
Not yet.
So where is the line between what we have in embedded systems inside your car and enterprise computing?
I think an IoT devices should have an IP address.
They all have IP addresses.
Yeah, it shouldn't have a lot of processing capabilities, so it's similar to.
How much processing power is there on that little ring doorbell that has the camera? It's still communicating, so it's IoT. And how many of you now have nav systems in your car that have backup cameras, but also let you go to Sirius, let you go to Netflix, let you go to apps, let you connect your phone? So if I can be in my car or vehicle, this is an app community, and I can get information from the internet, the 5% what's that top 5% there, John? Of the internet that isn't dark and isn't deep, it's surface, is that what you used? So if I can connect to the surface web from my car, and now I'm connected to that highway, which includes good and bad actors, and then I have a whole bunch of things inside my car, and I can extend that to my phone, and my phone is also cross-connected to my house and to work. What have you just done? You have completely lost control. So that's a really complex problem and a really great opportunity to do cybersecurity. You see how all these things interconnect in ways unexpected. So now when we're doing security design, you have to think about all these. It's more than a web now, it's a mesh of communication. And if you don't do it right, you really mesh it up. This presentation is a little technical in cars. I'm going to skip through a bunch of it at any time. If you see something you want to know more about, please, ask me, right? I am none of those people. If you think I am one of those people, you need to go see an eye doctor. So, this is setting the stage. Old cars had handles to open and close the window, and they had an extra pedal so that you could shift the transmission. That is not the world we live in. So what do we have? There's a whole bunch of entertainment systems on your car that I mentioned, but how many of you have driven a car that has either parking assist or lane holding for warning that someone is approaching you, okay? So there are dedicated sensors in your car and processing units, ECUs, electronic control units, that handle that. Those are dedicated systems. They don't really need to talk to too much else on the car. So there's circuitry for those sensors. They process it, they figure out to turn the light on and alarm that bell. However, if you hand wired all those, you would have many extra miles of wire, which equates to a lot of extra weight, which equates to much less gas miles per gallon performance. And engineers are smart, and they built in infrastructure. And inside car, there's a common transportation highway. You know, in the enterprise, we use networks and Ethernet. Inside a car is a thing called a CAN bus. And long before there were, well, not long before, for some reason, in the electronics industry, the terminology for network connection is a bus. You used to be able to put voltages on there, and that's how instrumentation works. So the other thing is, depending on the amount of money you spend and the feature set you get on your car, even 20 years ago, I was doing work for Mercedes, actually to do online training, and they had anti-skid, anti-skate, anti-lock systems on their cars, right? One helped you on the ice, the other one made it so if you're in an emergency and you hit the brake, the wheels wouldn't lock, which made you lose control. And what does it do? It puts the brakes on in such a way that you slow down, but you don't skid, right? And they had all these different systems. So in the last 20 years, there's only more and more and more of those. And if you look at a firm like Tesla, that's pushing over-the-air updates out to their car all the time, they are almost at autonomous, right? A friend who's even geekier than me has one, and we were driving on the roads of Colorado, and he basically took his hands off, he turned on all the bells and whistles, and except when there was an exit ramp, that car tracked the lane, he didn't have to do anything. And it did automatic adjusted cruise control. What is that? I want to go 70 miles an hour, because I saw a sign here on the highway that was legal, so I'm not being bad. And I'm in the lane, but as I approach another car, there's a whole other set of sensors that say, you know, there's something in front of us, and based on our current speed and the calculated stopping distance, we can't keep going 70, because we're going to get within a range that the engineers consider to be not safe. So what's it do? It drops the speed down. Even though your desire is to go 70, it drops the speed down so it increases the gap between you and the vehicle in front. That's all IoT, OT devices. It's in your car. It's another grouping of sensors and processors and decision making that somehow sends signals to its sister systems in the vehicle to either give less fuel or actually apply brakes or both. Why are we using the car as an example? It's almost no different than looking at a factory where you have an assembly line and you've got, you know, one line is, let's do bottled water, very simple. Water comes in as little tiny plastic plugs, and in one place those go through a process and they get blown into a mold. So that little thing that's about this big becomes that whole bottle. Otherwise, you'd have to ship these empty, fragile bottles, and they'd all crush. So they come in as a little piece of, almost like a plastic cube, gets blown, it goes to a fill station, it gets inspected to make sure the bottle is well formed, it goes, it gets water put into it. There's been a whole bunch of systems that take the water from the backyard, filter it, through a whole bunch of filtering processes, check that it's clear, there's no contaminants, all that stuff. They put it in, goes down to the next station, has to get capped, and it goes and gets labeled, and it goes and gets packaged. All these systems are talking to each other, right? Our job is to make sure our clients stay in control in an affirmative way of all these interconnected systems. And help them identify as soon as we can when someone is trying to take control away. And then, if someone is, help them automatically defend and regain control. Reasonable? There's a lot of stuff in the car. And once you know all this stuff, the people who build the cars, we call them OEMs. You call them Ford and Chevy and Toyota and Kia. They have a whole bunch of business use of this data. So this doesn't look very different than what John was telling you about in the sense of risks. It's all about identifying risk, same tools and techniques. What do you care about? What do you have that needs protection? How can people attack it? What kind of protections can you put in place to make it harder for them to do it? And here, because, an example said, do you go by John or Jonathan? Jonathan. So, in the examples Jonathan was using, for the most part, people just lose money, and that gets them upset. Here, you have the potential of losing life. So when you do what we call cyber physical systems, the engineers who design them and build them already think through an awful lot of scenarios and build in redundancies or safety settings that when things go wrong, they will shut down safe. Let's have an example of an elevator. How many of you have fear of elevators? Two honest people. Okay, but why in 170 or 160 years of using elevators don't we worry about it?
The brakes on the set for it open.
Okay, so this gentleman is saying they have brakes. What about those brakes that's important? They are a completely separate physical system that if anything goes wrong with the elevator, they engage. And Mr. Otis, who invented that, would go to state fairs and have his elevator, and he would chop the rope that was part of the pulley system for the elevator, and it would drop and stop. Because he had to prove it safe before people would adopt it. But it is completely separate system. How many of you have been on a train or seen movies about trains? Okay. I noticed not too many hands went up with going to the train. So you're going to design a train, and you're going really, really fast, and you lose power. What do you want the train to do? You want it to keep going down the hill, or do you want it to brake? You want it to brake. So, when you first built the train cars, you said, it's really tough to apply brakes, so we're going to put a pneumatic tube in there, and when we put air pressure in, it will apply the brakes. And that's a great design until you think about safety.
I thought it was the absence of pressure that applies the brakes.
But that's what I'm getting at. Okay. So the first guy said, we'll use pressure to apply the brakes because it takes a lot of energy and time to keep pressure in there. But then if you think about safety, what you do is you flip it around. When everything's operating well and the hoses have no leaks and I have power and I can pressurize it, I will set the brakes tube off and let it go. But if anything happens, that the pump doesn't work, or a line is broken, or someone chops the cord, and you lose pressure, the brakes come on. That's designing for safety. Well, for cyber, we will have to wind up very often changing the engineer's way of thinking of things from the beginning to design cybersecurity into products from day one. Because the world we live in today, for the most part, is the internet protocols that we use, which are still used on some of these cars to talk from the car to the infotainment system, to Google Maps, to the telematics operators. Those things were designed by engineers who were trying to see if they even could get two things to communicate without loss of data. They didn't think about, okay, if I get the data, should I believe it? So I'm a car, and somehow you get into my systems, and you send me a command that say, turn the engine off. Boom. Well, did the engineers who designed the car say, we probably ought to check that turn off the engine switch and make sure we're actually stopped before we allow the engine to be turned off? Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But more importantly, those checks might be from systems outside of where you're able to inject that command. So if you're able to find a path to the right part of the network to put in the turn the engine off, it may not matter if you're going 80 miles an hour, you bypassed that bolted on check. Because the engineer said, well, the only path to go through there is you have to go through this, and we won't even let you turn the key off if the car's running. I don't actually know if that's true. But they might have tried to build that in. Right? But if I can inject that command, most OT devices will obey. Anybody a Star Trek fan? A few people. The humans were being attacked by the Borg, and much better technology, but leave it to the cyborg to save the day. Data said, I found a low protected function, Captain Picard. I told the entire Borg cube to go to sleep. And that was like in 1988, and it's like a perfect example of what we could do. So if I'm able to get through the infotainment system, and from that get information on the internal command and control system inside your car and inject commands, if it's a well-addressed command and the command is legitimate, the car doesn't say, well, who are you? Who are you to tell me to do that at this moment? Now, what is that all about? When you go and log into any of the travel for your bank accounts, your banks now say, we're going to trust but verify. You claim to be Speaker? Okay, well, when Speaker set up their account, Speaker said, I've got this email address and this phone number. I'm going to send you a request. I'm going to send you some numbers, and if you plug those numbers in within a certain amount of time and they match the numbers I sent you, I will believe that you are Speaker. But inside the bus in your car, that stuff isn't there. And in fact, it's very challenging to build those things in to systems that run devices in the real world. So how do you come up with similar authentication and authorization techniques? That's why I challenge you. And you can too. We only have another few minutes. So some of these just kind of set up what you're talking to. This V2X thing is, as we're moving towards autonomous vehicles, there are a lot of new standards being designed. But how accurate is your GPS signal? Have you ever been standing on a corner and you looked at your phone and it said you were 2 blocks away? How would you like your car to think that too? Not favorable, huh? So the drift, if you look at the map for cars, can be multiple yards, 10, 12, 15 feet. When you get into places with a lot of steel, in a wall or a manufacturing site or someplace like that, the drift is terrible. So what's coming is lots of little devices that are going to go along the roads that give you micro-precise locations, IoT devices. They plug in between the stand and the light of the street light. And they will tell you where you are within an inch, which they call 2.54 centimeters. And that stuff's coming, so vehicle to infrastructure. But
Why did they decide to use that instead of what's available to the farming community and WASP, wide area augmentation system? That's centimeter accuracy just built into existing GPS.
But what's the difference between agriculture and being inside the city of Chicago? Wide open field, no interference. But it's still being, figured out how to do this all over, right? But fields tend to not have any things that pervert the radio waves. Cities, much worse. What do you do about things like, I live in Chicago now, we have Wagner Drive, really is what it's called. It has lower, middle, and upper Wagner Drive. How do you get signal there?
More sensitive receivers, higher power on satellites.
Maybe, my dad's not alive anymore, so I can't ask him, but, I think having local devices, because in general, the wall doesn't move very often, to augment that signal. If you use your phone today, there's a feature on most of them that says, turn on Wi-Fi, we'll give you a better position. Well, you know what, most Wi-Fi transceivers now will tell you their geolocation. So they use that Wi-Fi signal to help normalize the GPS signal that's coming to give you a better location. So, there have been baby steps there. How many of you have seen the ads for some of the insurance companies, one with represented by Bill, where they say, we'll monitor what you're doing? Okay, that monitor, when you take your car to the car dealer, to the left, where your left leg is, there's a port there called the OBD port, and that's onboard diagnostics. And if you plug anything in there, please make sure you know where it came from, because that device is talking right to the internals of your car. It's not just read-only, and it's trusted. It assumes anything plugged in there is okay. If that device sends a signal into your car while you're driving to do something unexpected, you're the passenger, and something can happen to you. So a lot of the car hacks we've heard about have been physical access. You had to actually plug into that. But there are other things that have been going on through the cell phone tower. There are over 1 million vehicles today that, unbeknownst to you, are reporting a lot of information about your personal vehicle back to the car dealer or the manufacturer of some of the components through its cell connection. And I only have like 2 more minutes, so is there anything important? That's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It has absolutely nothing to do with this presentation. I don't know why it's there, but I was there a month ago, and it actually looks like that. So, we talk a lot about anything you do, whether it's on the enterprise side or anything to do with devices, manufacturing, whatever. Putting on security after the fact is the worst approach. And I was having a chat with someone the other day, and they said, give you an example. So you're at a house, and at some point in your life, you said, I'd like to do a business. How about I'll open a daycare? This is your personal residence. So let's say that daycare is going to be for 50 kids. How do you think your house fits into that use case of being able to take care of 50 kids? Now let's say you have a field, right, and you're going to build a place, and your intent is to build a place to have daycare for 50 kids. Kids in diapers, preschoolers, kindergartners. And your parents, and unfortunately some of the parents, kids been born, got divorced, and sometimes grandma comes for them. I mean, wouldn't that building look a lot different than trying to convert your existing house to accommodate that need? That's the same thing that you need to do with security. Sir?
wondering how you balance the increase in security with the whole right to repair for cars? Because it seems like as you increase the complexity and the security of all the systems, it makes it more difficult for individuals to modify their cars in ways that they want to.
There's no doubt. And that's something the business works through. However, forget about security. Before I would travel 250 miles when I was 18, in my trunk, there was a fan belt, there was a gallon of water, there was antifreeze, there was a gapper. Then you don't even know what that is. There were spare spark plugs. Yeah. So, you know, the other side to what's been going on is the cheapest car today far exceeds anything a Cadillac had 30 years ago. So, you know, there are revolutions happening everywhere in reliability. You used to change spark plugs every 1,000, 2,000 miles. Now, when do you change them? Right. Right. And the spark plugs used to be made out of pretty cheap metal, and now they have 4 or 5 really expensive alloys sprayed 1 atom thick in a certain order that, you know, the machining tolerance on them is beyond belief. So, you know, in a constantly evolving, disruptive manufacturing environment, people like Apple design the next version of their phone with specs that no manufacturer, while they're doing design, can deliver, knowing that 18 months out when they're ready to prototype it, or 12 months out, their suppliers will have come up with what they need that will meet the compute, temperature, size, and manufacturing things they need. The car industry is doing the same thing.
I don't know, I think that they lag quite a bit.
Oh, they're not Apple, but they're still, you know, if you look at what they're building. Right? So, you know, there's price points. There's a lot of things around what you're willing to do. Car manufacturers have a different liability in the marketplace than Apple. How many Apple phones have killed people? Lots. But it's mostly because people at the national park, and they back up 1 extra step, and they fall off the mountain. It's not Apple's liability. All right, I've got 2 minutes. Questions?
For manufacturers, a bit of a challenge is that on one hand, we're encouraging them to create a digital twin, as it were, for the manufacturing processes, sharing information up and down the supply chain, you know, and getting remote support for your machinery from vendors and stuff like that. On the other hand, we want to keep it secure, so it's kind of a tension there between.
Yeah, but the techniques we use for security are first identify the attack vectors, identify what someone can do if they can get in there, and then identify how to protect it. And how you protect it are, don't connect it, put in appliance firewalls, have some kind of security access, have some kind of validation over the air. You know, it's very similar techniques.
So I've got a question. Do you think that there's any near-term chance that they get to the CAN bus to something that's better for them?
Yes.
I mean, legislatively, they'll allow it, because CAN bus and OBD is mandated by law.
Only after a whole bunch of people from SAE and the industry lobby for it, right? So things do change.
But it's not even in the near-term horizon, right, that they're going to get rid of OBD?
I will defer on that question. I'll say that's outside my wheelhouse. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, we didn't have commercial jet planes, okay? We also didn't have 2 of the states. Things change. Thank you very much.